Okay guys, what we're going to do is take a look at the layer panel right now. And we're going to create layers, and this is going to be the final thing we're going to hand in for our Photoshop class for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in to our layer panel, and right now we have a background layer. And the background layer is typically a full pixel layer that's locked, and it's locked so that we don't have the ability to change things. It is a good idea to not work on solid layers or work on background layers, simply because we want to do things in a non-destructive way. So what I typically do is come in and I duplicate this layer. Now you can click on this layer and click Command J to duplicate, or you can right click. You can click Duplicate Layer. I usually rename this, and you can rename layers by clicking on the names, or double clicking on the names and clicking and just typing something. So I call this base. And this is just a backup. In case I do something wrong to this or this somehow gets deleted, I have a base backup. Okay? And this allows me simply to come in and I can turn this off, I can delete it, and so on and so forth. In this panel, we have a bunch of options. So we talked about this in class. We have new, delete, group, adjustments, and things like that, masks. We'll talk about some of these later on, but what I typically do from here is I create a new blank layer, and I'm going to click on the new button, or hit Command-Shift-N. Command-Shift-N will create a new layer, and it will also allow you to name the layer here. If you just click on the new layer down here, I'll show you what happens. So let's go to clone, because that's what we'll be doing later on for retouching. We won't be doing this just yet, but I usually make a blank layer for that. If I just clicked on new layer down here, I'd have to rename the layer to clone. Now what I have is two layers, so we don't need that, so let's delete a layer. I can physically click and drag this down to the trash. I hate doing that myself, it's annoying. So you can also just click on the trash button and it gets rid of the layer. Do you want to delete the layer? Yes. There you go. We have adjustment layers, and adjustment layers are similar to tools and things like in Capture One. They allow you to make adjustments to a specific layer, not to an image. So if I were to convert something like this to black and white or do a bunch of work on this, it'd be very destructive. I can't go back and change what I'm doing. But if I use adjustment layers, I can go back and change my work. So let's use a black and white layer. So you can click on black and white here. If you don't like this, by the way, there's a little tool at the bottom of the layer panel, which brings up the same selection of adjustment layers. Now, you're going to notice in Photoshop there's a million different ways to do the same thing, and that's because every time there's a new version, they bring out a new way to do something, and they don't get rid of the old way. So, from there, what we can do is create black and white. Your image is now black and white, and what you can do is you can see a window that's fairly similar to the black and white adjustment tool in Capture One. You have a bunch of presets, okay? And you have, some of these have values in them automatically, and it just does it to balance out the channels between the primary and secondary channels. We're going to rename this to BNW, just so we know it's renamed and easier than black and white one. We'll come back to that in a little bit, so let's just close properties down. So that's my black and white adjustment layer. If I lower the opacity of my layer, and opacity just pretty much is a strength thing, you can see the color starts to come through. Okay, so what it's doing is just lowering the effect of that layer. There we go. So I can make it 0 and no longer is it black and white. Or I can make it 100%, or I can go 50. I can also type into this bar, click 50. What I'm doing is scrubbing. So if you click on the actual word, you'll see there's a little arrow. I'm over here. If I click and hold, you'll see you'll be able to scrub as well. Okay. If I turn that layer off by clicking on the preview, I'll just turn the layer off and it is no longer affecting my image. Now, depending on where this layer is in the stack, will dictate if it's shown or not. So right now, at the bottom of my background layer, I have its duplicate. I have my blank layer, and I have black and white adjustment layer. If I click and drag this below my clone layer, nothing happens because there's nothing in this layer. It's blank. That's what these checkerboards indicate. But if I drag this below my base, I no longer see my adjustment, and that's because this solid layer is blocking the adjustment. If I were to turn that layer off, I would see it again. If I bring it back on, I don't, and that's because it's blocking this. So we need to make sure we're always making sure that our layers and adjustment layers are in the proper order in the stack. We want to have adjustment layers after we do retouching work. Okay. And if I bring out a curve, there we go, my curve. Now, in an adjustment layer, the properties tool allows you to make the adjustments to the layer. So if I turn that off, I can then make my adjustments. And just like we did in Capture One, here's the curve dialog box. So if I want to mess with my shadow detail, I can darken that down, can bring my midtones back up and my highlights to make a little bit of contrast. The nice thing about this though is I can turn the effect on or off to hide it. I can literally see what I'm doing. I can see that I'm adding some contrast to this image, and it starts to look a little bit better. Let's rename that to contrast. Okay, very, very useful, I find, for Photoshop. Now, with the curve adjustment tool is a really cool option, and you'll see this icon a lot. It's a hand with two arrows. You can actually click into your image, and similar to Capture One, you'll see a little circle here. In Capture, you see a line. This you see a circle. I can click and I can drag points up and down in the image itself in the curve if I wanted to. I don't like to do this too much because what it ends up doing is you may run into the problem of grabbing a point and then removing contrast between two areas. So what I've done to the grass looks horrible. You need to be careful with that. But it's another way of using the tool, and the black and white adjustment tool is the same one. So I can click on this tool, I can come into here, and it'll adjust the appropriate color channel for me, either darkening or lightening that area. Very, very cool. Lastly, we're going to look at the text tool. And I think Bowie has shown you this, but with the text tool and the character window, let's bring that out. Window, character. What I want you guys to do is choose a font that looks good. We'll talk about fonts much later on. And you're just going to give your image a name. I'm going to go with Helvetica Bold. Now I'm going to set that to very large. And my color is going to be white. I'm just going to call this Spin. I'm going to move that around with my Move tool. And we're going to transform that. So I can close character for now. And I'm going to make that larger just by using Free Transform. Free Transform works very interestingly enough. I can pretty much resize an image by going up to Edit, Free Transform, or Command T. And I can click on one of these control boxes, and I can totally transform my image. But be careful what you're doing. You can see that I'm really warping everything. Okay? We want to be able to constrain that. So I'm going to hit Command T, and I hold down Shift, and this will constrain this by making that a bit larger. Once you've done your transformation, you can either come up here to the check mark or hit Command Enter, and I can place this around to where I want. Okay? There you go, guys. That's how the layers work. I can turn that layer off, I can delete it, and this is a typical layer structure for any image. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how to hand this in.